Many have had to flee, have seen their relatives drafted into military service, but also during that process of fleeing have witnessed traumatic acts of violence, been caught up in shelling, been caught up in airstrikes, and still up to now are seeing and feeling the effect of the crisis.
Let's talk about Ukraine, because the British people have been extremely generous in their support of Ukraine since the conflict started. The Disaster and Emergency Committee is one of the charities that have been working on the ground through this support. They have raised over £400 million for their campaign. We're joined now by Sven Coppens, Response Manager from Plan International. It's a charity which is part of the Disaster and Emergency Committee. He's just returned from Kharkiv, actually. Good morning to you.
Morning.
There are many people who will have donated money, who are still donating money to Ukraine, who feel very strongly about that we should support Ukraine. But what does that money actually do out in Ukraine?
Well, for us as an organization focusing on children, a lot of the generous support from the UK public through the DEC appeal is particularly focusing on alleviating the huge impact that the crisis had on the lives of children. Many have had to flee, have seen their relatives drafted into military service, but also during that process of fleeing have witnessed traumatic acts of violence, been caught up in shelling, been caught up in airstrikes, and still up to now are seeing and feeling the effect of the crisis. So, for instance, in Kharkiv, we were visiting one of the bomb shelters, and hearing the story of an adolescent girl in that bomb shelter that basically also during safer periods of time, it's refusing to go out of the shelter. So the mental health, for instance, on children of this crisis is taking enormous proportions. So part of the work that Plan International, including with funds received from through the DEC appeal or DEC appeal, is about tackling these situations. It is about working with psychosocial service providers, but also then to change the physical infrastructures in which some of the affected children are living.
Mm. And when you speak to the people who have been affected by this, what do they say? Because we're approaching 1 year now, and many of these people will have not known anything other than living in fear for a year. What do they say about how they have been affected psychologically?
Well, it is what we see, and also what the stories that we capture are actually indicating. It's still taking a heavy toll on children and young people's mental health in particular, and their well-being, but also on the well-being of caregivers. So we have a lot of talks also done with teachers who have to play a leadership role in the caregiving of children, but at the same moment of time are themselves affected by having had to flee, so they're not in the locations where they work. And then when the physical safety is at stake, psychosocial support provision is rarely prioritized in emergencies. So we are witnessing children losing sleep, they're becoming anxious, depression. I already gave the example of withdrawal. The anxiety, for instance, we met families in Venetia in the central part of Ukraine. And whenever they hear, it's quite a rural area where they are, but whenever they hear loud sounds, that basically the anxiety kicks in.
Yes,
So these are a couple of examples rather than what people are saying and children are saying. It's the way that we can observe children and the effect of the crisis on children.
Yes, of course. Sven, it's something we should always remember, actually. Sven, thank you very much for talking to us. Sven Coppens, who is a response manager from Plan International.